Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your stack of complex source materials and, well, we give you that essential shortcut to being well-informed.
And today we are deep in the mechanics of U.S. patent law, specifically Chapter 2300 of the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, or MPEP.
We're looking at how the system handles these really high-stakes disputes, and we're zeroing in on derivation proceedings.
Right. For anyone who's a bit less familiar, these are the formal battles that get launched when one inventor says, hey, that other inventor, they took the core of my invention. It's all about protecting inventorship integrity.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really clarify the single biggest procedural power shift in that whole process. What happens the very instant a derivation proceeding is formally instituted by the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, the PTAB.
It's the moment the file literally leaves the examiner's desk and lands squarely in the jurisdiction of this specialized tribunal.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What is the immediate consequence of that institution, and what happens right away?
What's really fascinating here is just the sheer force of this jurisdictional transfer. I mean, this isn't a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable legal command.
Okay.
The core rule, which you'll see referenced throughout the guidelines, dictates that the board acquires exclusive jurisdiction over any involved file. And it happens the very instant it initiates the case.
Exclusive jurisdiction. That sounds absolute. So if I'm an applicant, and my file has been moving along with an examiner for months, what happens to that process? Does it just slow down?
No, it comes to a dead halt automatically. The transfer of authority is, as you said, absolute and immediate.
So all other proceedings are just stopped?
All other proceedings for that specific file within the USPTO are automatically suspended. The only way anything moves forward is if the board explicitly orders it to.
That is a monumental administrative shift. It's not just changing who handles the paper, it's a total rerouting of the legal authority.
Exactly.
It kind of sounds like a local police case suddenly being taken over by the FBI, who then seizes all the evidence.
Right.
Why is this centralization so necessary?
It really serves two key purposes. First, it ensures procedural consistency. You just can't have an examiner in one division making decisions on, say, patentability,
Right.
while the PTA is simultaneously trying to figure out the foundational issue of who the real inventor is. Their decisions could completely conflict.
And you'd have chaos. What's the second reason?
Well, more importantly, it ensures impartial adjudication. Derivation disputes are specialized. They could be pretty hostile. They really need to be handled by the PTAB, which is designed for that kind of adversarial hearing, not the General Examination Division.
Okay, so let's focus on the examiner then. The person who knows this file best, who's been doing the prior art searches, writing the office actions, they are just instantly sidelined.
Completely. The guidance is crystal clear on this. Once an application is involved in a derivation proceeding, that original patent examiner may not act on it.
At all.
Not unless they're expressly authorized by the board. Their job is, for all intents and purposes, paused until the PTAB relinquishes control. The PTAB becomes the sole authoritative source.
This shift really tells you, as someone watching the process, just how seriously the system views a challenge to inventorship. It just overrides everything.
It has to.
So let's pivot to the practical side, because this is where the strategic implications really start to pile up for the applicant. When all other proceedings get suspended, what specific activities are immediately put on ice?
So the most crucial thing that stops is the core function of the examination process itself. The examiner immediately stops evaluating the merits of the invention.
So no more prior art searches, no more crafting rejections based on obviousness or anticipation?
None of it. And critically, no further evaluation of the technical sufficiency of the disclosure itself.
So all those standards we talk about on here regularly, like does the application fail the utility test, or does it meet the written description and enablement requirements, all of that just freezes.
Exactly. That whole complex technical analysis just, it's paused.
And it makes sense, right? Why would the USPTO spend resources examining if an invention is fully enabled if the PTA might just rule that the applicant didn't invent it in the first place?
The question of who invented it takes absolute precedence over what was invented.
Precisely.
That saves administrative time, sure, but it also creates this immediate strategic breathing room for the applicant. Now they don't have to fight the examiner and the other party at the same time.
That's a great point. But it's not just the substantive examination that halts. The administrative paperwork machinery also comes to a grinding stop.
Oh, interesting. So routine things like processing replies or amendments to claims, that's all on hold too.
All of it. Anything that keeps the file moving is halted.
Can you give us a specific example, of administrative paperwork chaos that this freeze avoids?
Sure. Let's think about continuing applications. Normally, if you file, say, a continued prosecution application or a CPA, the prior application might get a notice of abandonment.
Right, a standard procedure. But once a derivation proceeding is instituted, that whole administrative flow is stopped. The board takes charge of managing the status of all these interconnected files to prevent any administrative errors or complications during the dispute.
Okay, now let's talk about one of the most complex issues that often comes up with related filings: double patenting. This is huge, especially if the parties involved were maybe once collaborators. How does this affect that?
They are immediately frozen. Any pending double patenting rejections, whether statutory or non-statutory, between the involved application and other related filings are put on standby.
And the reason for that, I'm guessing it's pretty profound.
It is, and it links directly back to public policy.
So give us that deeper insight. Why is freezing double patenting so critical here?
Well, the guidance materials explain that double patent rules exist to prevent a very specific problem: the possibility of multiple suits against an accused infringer by different assignees of patents claiming patentably indistinct variations of the same invention.
In other words, to stop the public from being harassed by a bunch of slightly different patents on the same basic idea.
You've got it. So since PTT is now deciding the very origin and integrity of the invention, who is entitled to claim what, the board has to be the one to adjudicate that complex relationship.
So the freeze is much more than just a convenience. It's an active intervention to ensure market fairness and prevent downstream litigation risk. The PTT basically steps in to define the ownership boundaries before anyone can use the system as a weapon.
That is absolutely the key takeaway. Centralization ensures that the ownership question is resolved cleanly and authoritatively before the administrative system moves forward and grants rights that might just be challenged or invalidated later.
Okay, so we've established that the application that's involved in the proceeding is frozen. The examiner's hands are tied. But the USPTO is a huge system.
Yeah.
What about related applications? The MPP guidance suggests this freeze isn't a total shutdown for all associated files. Is that right?
That's a really crucial nuance, and it highlights the strategic complexity here. The guidance is clear that examination may continue in related cases, but, and this is a big but, it is not automatic.
And when we say related cases, what are we talking about?
Usually this means applications that claim benefit from the involved file. So, for example, a later non-provisional application that claims the filing date of the earlier application, the one that's now stuck in the derivation proceeding.
I see. So that related application might still be processed by its own examiner.
It might, assuming it's not also directly named in the proceeding, but the examiner can't just proceed as if nothing's happening.
Right. If the core filing is under PTAB authority, any action on a related application could inadvertently mess things up or prejudice the proceeding. There has to be a gatekeeper.
There is. The examiner absolutely does not proceed unilaterally. They must consult with a specialized resource first. This resource is known as the Interference Practice Specialist, or IPS.
Okay, let's spend a moment on the IPS. They sound like the liaison between the PTAB's world and the regular examination world. What's the single most critical question the IPS needs to answer before letting work continue on that related case?
The consultation is all about determining one thing: whether the claims in the related application would be barred in the event the applicant loses the interference.
And that's the ultimate so what for the applicant's lawyer.
It really is. It's high stakes. If the claims in that related continuing application are derived from the same source as the contested claims,
And the PTAB rules against your client,
then all that prosecution work on the related case was wasted, and any resulting patent could be invalidated or barred.
wow, it forces the applicant to weigh a huge risk. Do you keep spending money prosecuting a related application knowing that its entire foundation, the inventorship, is being fundamentally contested somewhere else?
Exactly. The PTAB's potential negative ruling casts this huge legal shadow over those other filings. The IPS is the checkpoint. Their job is to flag that potential outcome and coordinate with the board.
Which confirms that the PTAB taking jurisdiction isn't just about shuffling papers. It's about establishing a singular, specialized venue for impartial adjudication. It's about protecting the integrity of inventorship.
The entire system is really designed to push this one specific foundational question: who is the true inventor? Right to the front of the line. It pauses everything else until that integrity is confirmed.
So, what does this all mean for you, the learner, as you put this all together? The administrative machinery of patent examination stops on a dime the moment the PTA institutes a derivation proceeding.
The file transitions from that standard examination process to this authoritative, centralized adjudication.
And the PTA holds the reins on every aspect of that file. It forces this temporary stop to examination activities like utility review and double patenting analysis.
And at the same time, it establishes that crucial supervisory check on any related applications through the interference practice specialist.
Correct.
And, we often find that derivation disputes are not random. The MPP frequently references cases involving common ownership or inventions made under a joint research agreement.
Right.
Parties who were, at one point, closely related.
Collaborators who are now adversaries.
Right. And that history of collaboration before the hostility began, it raises a really important question for you to mull over. When two or more parties that were originally linked by common ownership enter a hostile derivation dispute, how does this rigid, centralized, procedural control of the PT fundamentally reshape their legal strategy compared to just fighting a patentability rejection during a normal examination?
It changes everything because the question shifts from a technical challenge to a fight for the very right to even claim the invention.
That's a powerful distinction.
Yeah.
And finally, we just want to note that this deep dive is part of a much larger series dedicated to exploring the MPP. And for that, we owe a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who helped organize the vision for making all this complex material accessible.
And as always, please remember this deep dive is for general, educational, and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice. For authoritative guidance on your specific circumstances, please consult the official MPP or a qualified patent practitioner.